Hey everyone, welcome back for another campaign diary. I'm here once again, let's just get right down to it. So when last we left our heroes, you'll remember they had taken the port city of Dax'an. They had then had some issues with the locals, who were not exactly all too happy with their invasion occupation of Dax'an. And I did it, of course, to try and get some of that sense of consequences for their actions. Not necessarily that, oh, what you're doing is bad, but just there are repercussions. So for this time, we had Sonia joining us, we had Braden joining us, we had Danny, we had Sam, we had Sydney. I think we had everybody, if I recall correctly. Again, I have to point out the fact that, this was a lot of this stuff took place, all these sessions happened about a year ago, so I'm trying to recall, I talked to some of my players, try and get what I can from them, but it's a little difficult. So, when I kick things off, I had, the parties hanging out in Dax'an still, and I had a messenger arrive from Renovas, the capital of Bartholomits territory, explaining that Bartholomits now has new orders for them. He is aware that there is an army coming from the north, that Fritzherbert is sending a massive invasion force south to kind of just steamroll his way into the territory. And there's a series of caves that Fritzherbert uses a lot to transfer troops to and from. And so what he wants the party to do is he's aware that there's actually a roper, which is this very creepy, stalagmite monster, and it's it's got one giant eye and a giant mouth, and it's got tentacles, and they just sit there in caves and wait for unaware passerbys to come, and then it lashes out and attacks them and tries to kill them and eat them. And what Bartholomits wants the party to do is he wants them to go to this cave system in the mountains and try and negotiate with this roper to try and get it to turn to their side, to say basically, hey, there's gonna be a bunch of guys coming. We want you to eat them, and if you eat them, we will basically pay you. Now, ropers, of course, really don't need gold quite the same way, but they enjoy eating stuff like jewels and such. As they keep them, they kind of keep them as a horde, almost like a dragon. Now, this mountain range that the roper is in follows part of the border that between Fritzherbert territory and Bartholomits' territory. So the party sets out, and they head south and southwest, really, to this mountain range. And they arrive there, and I just explain, time travels, and over the next couple days, you slowly get there. And I explain, as you ride into these mountains, it gets a little chillier as you're starting to get higher in elevation. And now they're like, all right, now we need to try and find this cave system. And they said, okay, you have an idea. So I said, roll me survival checks, roll me someone was like, can I roll an investigation check, perception checks? They rolled a lot of dice, and I said, I gave them, this mountain range, this mountain here looks similar to what the messenger described. You guys do have a map of the area. This kind of looks right. Yeah, you're going in the right direction. Perception check. Fail, succeed. There's the cave. So basically, they just walked in. They're like, all right, we know there's a roper in here somewhere. Braden, go forward. And they basically just sent Braden forward, pushed him forward, and had him walk through the cave. And they fall, and they were all right behind it. But I figured, that way we have the tanks in front. And sure enough, pretty quickly the thing kind of explodes out, and it kind of lashes out, and they withdraw real fast, and they backed off, and they kind of start trying to talk to it, and they back off out of its range, and they're like hey, they're trying to talk to it, hey, we're friendlies, we want to talk, we want to make a deal. And slowly over time, what it is ropers don't have a language. Ropers are ancient. If you read kind of their lore, they're these very kind of primordial creatures, and they don't have a language, but they do have telepathy, or actually I'm not sure if they do have telepathy. I at least gave it telepathy. That way it would have a way of communicating with the players. But because it didn't have a language, I thought it would be more fun if the players didn't speak a language, period. If they it communicated through thoughts and ideas and images and such. And so I would I would kind of tell the players, oh, you see, as it's kind of communicating, you see flashes of it talking, you see mountains, you see you see itself, you see it ripping people apart, you see then followed kind of directly by you guys, and then kind of these images of you guys getting ripped apart and it gobbling you up. And they're like, okay, it wants to kill us. So they started talking, they're like, okay. They started, sending their own images. Hey, kind of friendship and stuff like that. Warm feelings. We want to project warm feelings through the telepathy and such. And it was kind of a lot of fun on my part, at least, to try, they had to try and figure out kind of like a puzzle how to exactly talk with a creature that doesn't have a language. And I did my best, and I made challenges, and they kind of said, okay, you like, treasure, and it's like, yes, I like treasure. And they're like, okay, well, we know where you can get lots of stuff. It's like, oh, goody, where? And they're like, well, they like, showed an image of, a bunch of people walking through the gates. It's like, ooh, eat, 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 eat. Nom, nom, nom. And they're like, yes, yes, yes. And it's like, well, why? Kind of, this questioning, well, why should I, kind of. And they're like, well, because we'll then, provide you with even more stuff. And it's like, okay. Now, there was kind of some issues that they were trying to, explain some of the concepts. And it took them a lot of, at one point they were struggling to figure out the word, map. Kind of, to explain stuff. And also kind of hoping to get some information from it. Because, again, ropers are these very primordial beings. And they basically, you can kill them, but they don't die of old age quite the same way. They just kind of split. And they just, they kind of, asexually split. And they keep all the memories. So, there's the first original ropers. They kind of just exist all the way down. And because they retain all the memories from the asexual split, it remembers everything from the current moment all the way to the beginning of time from when it was created. And so they were trying to get some information out of it about, them kind of trying to get a map of the area and trying to do that. And again, as they were trying to say map and kind of, project this idea, they really struggled with it. And it was kind of fun to do that. And I think we spent about an hour and a half kind of going back and forth doing this little dance until we finally kind of got there, like, okay, it's going to work with us. And at one point I said, all right, you guys have, I basically kind of as a DM said, okay, you've succeeded, congratulations. They said, all right. Then they had the idea, let's try and steer the army into this cave. Let's try and make sure they go through this cave. And so they kind of, went back north and they, rolled some more survival checks and they found the army. It wasn't too hard to do to track down a massive army moving south. And at this point, they started they're like, okay, we're going to go up, we're going to approach the army, basically say we want to talk to, you want to talk to your general. And of course, all the guards are kind of suspicious. They're like, why do you want to talk to our general? They're kind of, this doesn't bode well. And they had to roll some persuasion checks to do all this. And they managed to make it to the general and talk to him, but when they reached the general, they didn't roll very well, and he also rolled really well himself, and so he was a little less swayed. He wasn't like, oh, they were like, oh, you should totally take this path down. Of course, he's like, well, why should I trust you? And they're like, well, we just came from there, we're loyal soldiers of we're loyal soldiers of Fritzlis, and they show them some insignia they've picked up from soldiers they've killed over the past, and still he wasn't quite buying it, so they're like, alright, well, crap. So then they kind of split up their ways. Brayden said, okay, I want to try and make a stampede, to try and force the guys into there, and I was like, alright. And I had to roll some animal handling checks. First, he had to find a herd of animals using a bunch of survival, but with a little bit of help from Sam, he succeeded. He found a herd of, basically, they were like these deer, elk things. I didn't want them to be quite like, deer or elk, so I had to, I described it a little bit differently. I said, they've got, some of them have antlers, but they're, very simple, more kind of horns and stuff like that. And they're like, okay, the deer animal-like creatures, but whatever. And I said, all right, you roll some animal handling checks as you try her. He's like, well, can I do intimidation? I said, okay, that's fair. He still just wasn't rolling very well. Brayden, for the most part, rolls incredibly well. He seems to have this knack for getting nat 20s when he wants them. And this isn't a matter of, oh, he fudges the dice roll. No, he literally rolls, and we can all witness the fact that he just rolled a nat 20. And we're just like, oh, for crying out loud. At the same time, Sonia, decided, she's like, okay, she and a couple others decided, let's try and talk to soldiers, see if we can maybe get some information out of them. Maybe we can ingratiate ourselves with them, that way we can have an easier time getting them to go into this cave system. And so they're like, okay, we'll just, we'll play card games. And that was kind of fun, rolling some dice for some skills like performance and sleight of hand and a couple other things. Skills that the players don't typically use. They use lots of, dexterity or athletics or perception, lots and lots of perception, some investigation, survival, but they rarely do stuff like performance or sleight of hand or nature or such, or animal handling in Brayden's case. And I admit there was we were kind of burning time a little bit. We had set aside, I think we had about 3 hours to do this for our session. And we completed all the roper stuff, all the stuff I really wanted to do pretty quickly. So at that point we're like, all right, we have a little over an hour left. Let's just, the players were like, we'll just keep going. And I was, as a DM, just kind of, BSing my way through it. And the whole time, Brayden's getting kind of frustrated as he's trying to, make this stampede happen. And I'm just like, you're just not rolling well enough. I'm sorry, Brayden, but And I admit, I was kind of a little like, not exactly super happy, but I didn't like this idea. Now I know that sounds bad, but it was a bit of like, it's just the idea didn't make sense to me. I didn't see how this could all work, but Brain had his vision, and so eventually I said, okay, the stampede goes, and the army kind of shifts off, but they kind of just send a bunch of people off to kill a bunch of these deer-like creatures, come back, and they'll just continue their path. And Brain was like, dang it, well. And it kind of just ended there. At that point, they're just like, you know what, let's just leave them. I mean, they had considered a couple ideas, like, maybe we could kill the general, like, sneaky. We could kill him sneakily, and then we could, like, impersonate him and get him to kind of order all the troops to move through this tunnel system. And they came up with a couple of different ideas, but they never really went with any of them. They just kind of said, all right. They eventually kind of said, all right, we'll try again. We'll try and suggest it to him one last time. And this time they rolled decently, and so I said, all right, he's susceptible to the idea. He considers it, and he says, thank you for your time, and he's kind of like, we'll kind of keep going as I see fit, but I'll take that into consideration. And they're like, all right, we kind of won. And at that point, they said, all right, we're going to kind of head back to, like, Renovas, or we're going to kind of, we're at least going to leave. We're going to get out of this army and head out. And that's where we ended it. And it was kind of a weird session. It was mostly, I had this idea of the roper that I really wanted to do. I was skimming through an old monster manual. I think it was like 4th edition monster manual. And I saw the roper. I was like, oh, that'd be kind of fun. Let's do some stuff with that. And since that was about all I had planned, everything else after it kind of got weird and just kind of happened. But it was a good session, and I think, this is, well, nothing really important happened or nothing really exciting happened. It just happened, and it's really something we don't as a group, we don't really talk about that much. Nothing that there's anything wrong with it, we just don't talk about it like we do with some of the other adventures. So I know that's kind of a dull or boring or kind of just an campaign diary. It was kind of a dull, boring session. And well, no, I think we all walked away kind of like, that was kind of fun. We weren't, it wasn't super exciting like some of our other ones have been, like the next ones. The next one is exciting, and we'll bring that up later. Until next time, guys, stay cool.